Yeah.
Yeah, they're talking about critical race theory and that
Mm.
revisionist history is what's being taught. But really, it's accurate history. The versions they want taught in schools is what the actual revisionist history is.
So let's talk a little bit about right-wing evangelicals, just how it applies to the news of this week, right? If that's okay. So you have these LA riots that are going on. Donald Trump calls in the Marines. Law enforcement says they don't need the extra help. The governor, the mayor, and it seems like some of these people are getting roughed up. Is this what Jesus Christ would have wanted? Is this what evangelicals say that they want? They want brown people being treated inhumanely. What do you make of this?
There's a lot of cognitive dissonance that goes on when you are a Christian nationalist, because on one hand, they will say they follow the teachings of Jesus, but MAGA Christianity, Christian nationalism, is the antithesis of what Jesus actually stood for. When he said, I was a stranger and you did not welcome me, and what you do to the least of these, you've done to me. And there's just a lot of hypocrisy that runs very deeply. But a lot of people who perpetuate Christian nationalism don't realize that's what they're doing. They think they're just being good Christians because when you have a pastor from the pulpit or they have Fox News or talk radio, they have confirmation bias all around them that just convinces them what they're doing and the side that they're on is good and that they're doing the right thing despite the fact that it goes against the red letters.
You know, April, I feel like when many of these evangelicals call out or attack the bigotry that comes out of their mouth when it comes to homosexuality, the LGBT community, and transgenders, they seem to use their religion as an excuse. Do you find that this is what a lot of these people do?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And I think it depends on the person. I think you have some bad faith actors who are cruel people and maybe just not good people that use Christianity and as a way to kind of shield their own bigotry. Hate wrapped in a scripture is still hate, but you see a lot of people using scripture and weaponizing it to justify what they already believe and to kind of to justify promoting the patriarchy and promoting white men in power. You also have other people though who I think get wrapped into it because they're born into it. Their entire family is that way. They're pastors, their education, they go to Christian school or they're homeschooled, and they are only shown a very uh, propaganda idea of what is actually happening. Because I don't think a lot of people like I know I live in Kentucky, so I am around a lot of MAGA Christians. A lot of them have no idea what's actually happening. I think a lot of it is ignorance is bliss. Maybe they're choosing not to look at it, which they don't have to because they're comfortable, but they are just seeing a completely different narrative of what is actually happening with the immigrants. They're being shown violent stories of people who are undocumented that are committing crimes, and that's all. They don't know the stat that you're far more likely to commit a violent crime if you are a US citizen as opposed to an undocumented immigrant.
Hey, April, I had a question for you. So I kind of believe, going back just for historical purposes, 2,000 years, I kind of feel like Judas Iscariot was the first MAGA. It kind of feels like MAGA saw this Jesus guy, right? Now, whether you believe it or not, that's okay. Believe what you want. Like, he's this soft little radical left socialist paid for by George Soros. He helped people. He gave food to people. Oh, he's just giving everything away. And they're like, nah, we good. We're going to roll with Barabbas over here. And it kind of feels like in November, once again, that's what they did. It doesn't feel to me, and tell me if I'm wrong, because I kind of grew up in a Baptist church myself, that they don't want, like what Bishop Boudet said, let's have compassion and kindness and empathy. They're kind of like, no, we're good. We're going to roll with Barabbas, the insurrectionist murderer. Am I wrong? It kind of feels like MAGA's been around for like 2,000 years. The only difference is Judas Iscariot didn't have a red hat made in China. Am I off base?
No, I don't think so. I think there's been some form of Christian nationalism or weaponizing of Christianity since the beginning. And people have debated what it means to be a quote unquote true Christian since the dawn of Christianity, began. And I think what you see today, you see it more on the Republican side. where they say, only true Christians vote Republican. Like there's this ingrained belief, regardless of what the Bible actually says, this ingrained belief that Republicans are the Christian party, and that in order to be a true Christian, you cannot vote for a Democrat. Because
Right.
when you bring up these ideals of immigrants and taking care of the poor, the widow, and what Trump's trying to do with gutting Medicaid with this big beautiful bill, there are
Mhm.
so many things that go against what we're supposed to be doing as Christians. But it's almost become this cultural identity and this political identity as opposed to a religion, because it's been
Yeah.
co-opted. Like
Mhm.
when you are a Christian nationalist, your political beliefs are so intertwined with your theology that you can't really tell the difference. They've become one and the same.
If you're just joining us, by the way, she is April A. Joy, author of The Star Spangled Jesus. It's a great book, and talks about how dangerous these people on the far right, these crazy right-wing evangelicals are. I wanted to ask you, what do you make of the fact that Donald Trump sells Bibles made in China for $3 for $60? Yet these many of these people on the far right, they don't seem to have a problem with that. They don't seem to have a problem with the fact that he literally is involved in these crypto scandals and the womanizing and the cheating. You want to talk about somebody who is a sinner? You couldn't find somebody that's probably a bigger sinner than Donald Trump. What do you make of that, and the fact that they seem to be okay with somebody selling Bibles and making money off of the fact that he lies about the Bible being his favorite book when he can't read one passage in the book?
Well, it's the bane of my existence. I mean, I used to be a Christian nationalist. So I come from this world, was very conservative and Christian, although I would have never said I was a Christian nationalist. And I think most people who perpetuate that today think they're just being good Christians. It's in the blood. But Donald Trump was a huge eye opener for me, because I remember being a kid in the 90s with the Bill Clinton scandal and hearing my dad, who was a pastor, and all of his pastor friends
Mhm.
talk about the importance. Character mattered. And if a man would lie to his wife, if Bill Clinton could lie to Hillary, how much more would he lie to the American people? And that's why it's important to always put good, righteous, moral men in office. And it was ingrained in me then that Republicans were good because they were willing to hold Bill Clinton accountable, and Democrats were bad because they weren't. And then suddenly Donald Trump comes along, and character just surprisingly didn't matter anymore, because we were voting for a president, not a pastor. And literally they had never said that before in my entire life. So it is quite the conundrum. And also, indoctrination is a hell of a drug.
I was going to say two things. I don't know if you knew, I didn't talk when we talked about this. I was a Republican until 2016, and I left the party when I'm like, this is a religious cult. This is basically the same, like a ball or a golden calf when Moses came down. You know what gets me? Maybe you can shed some light. I mean, I kind of know some of the answers, but I want to get your opinion. What gets me is these evangelicals, right? That are like, oh, praise Jesus, they saved Donald Trump's little orange ear, right? Okay, well, where was Jesus during the Holocaust, the First World War, the Second World War, during slavery, during Jim Crow? Like, where was God during all these atrocities? But this man who rapes women, who's a convicted felon, who causes an insurrection, who doesn't rent to black people, all of a sudden, God comes down from heaven and he's going to save this guy. How? I don't explain to me the cognitive dissonance involved to actually believe something that bananas.
It's a great question. I'll try to explain it. You can't, I will say what I'm going to say is not going to make sense, because it doesn't make sense. There's no logic behind it.
Mm-hmm.
For one instance, like take the Holocaust, for example. We were taught that it was good Christians in America and in Britain that brought down Hitler, right? That we were always the good guys. I was never taught how overwhelmingly the German evangelical church supported Hitler. So you already have this kind of understanding of history that
Mhm.
Christians were always the good guys, never the bad guys, because you're not taught an accurate version. It's the same thing with like America and American exceptionalism, that God founded America or helped George Washington create America, founded on Christian ideals. So there's already just a basic misunderstanding of a lot of historical facts and just facts in general.
What do you, when I hear, because nationalism is a big thing, right? When I hear people like Mike Johnson, he's a white nationalist, say, this is a Christian nation. And when I actually look back, We literally stole black people from Africa. We
Mhm.
murdered the Native Americans and stole their land. We took the land from the Mexicans. We took the land from the Hawaiians. We've literally taken everything. And we designed this country by slave-owning founding fathers that said that black people were worth 3/5 of a person. Were they made in the shadow of God? Like, how, in what place was this a Christian nation? Like, what year are they pointing to where we treated everybody the same and we love thy neighbor as thyself? What year do they give you when you ask them?
Well, I'll just tell you what I was taught. And it was that it was good Christian Republican men that freed the slaves, and that it was not true Christians that fought on the side of the South.
Okay.
And that, the men that used scripture to justify slavery back then, they weren't true Christians. It's the same thing they would say about Christians who supported Hitler. That there's this rewriting of, well, we would never be like that, and it's the same way they kind of romanticize Martin Luther King Jr. today too. Of they act like they would be on the side of MLK and the civil rights movement when they're screaming all lives matter and demonizing Black Lives Matter and demonizing immigrants. And like what's actually happening today, there's just it's this, rose-colored glasses, right? Where you look at history and you can't admit that you would have ever been the villain in the story. You always had to have been the good guy.
Right.
And so it's this whitewashing of history, which is ironic because Christian nationalists and MAGA today has this war on education. Right.
Yeah,
They say,
yeah.
they're talking about critical race theory and that revisionist history is what's being taught. But really, it's accurate history. The versions they want taught in schools is what the actual revisionist history is.
Right.
I'm wondering, April, if you had the opportunity to speak in front of a very large crowd of all right-wing evangelicals that support Donald Trump, with everything that your experience, and of course, writing this book, your expertise, I'm curious, what would you say to them right now? I would call them cultists. What would you say to these right-wing evangelical cultists that think Donald Trump can do no harm? What would be your message to them?
It's hard because there's so many different. What I would want to say, I would just want to shake them, right? And just like, wake up, like I would probably read the Beatitudes, read the teachings of Jesus, because that really makes MAGA mad now, because I think that they can realize what they're doing is actually the opposite of Jesus. But what I would say is I sadly do think it's way easier to demonize all of MAGA because they're promoting and perpetuating and supporting really, really harmful policies and people that is causing a lot of damage, and it's infuriating.
Completely. Yeah.
But also a lot of them think they're doing the right thing, as twisted as it is, like somehow mean well. Not that negates any harm, but there's like, I do think there's some goodness in them still that can be appealed to. And I think that is where we find the common ground to get them to change. I don't think a lot of them are seeing the videos of the children being ripped from their mothers. Fox News isn't showing that.
No.
And I would just say, hey, listen, I know as a mom, find common ground. Like, you're a mom, I'm a mom. I know, like, if you found yourself in another country, you would not want that government to rip those children from you.
So well said. Couldn't have said it any better myself. I want to give people the opportunity to read this wonderful book, Star Spangled Jesus. April, can you tell me a little bit about it before I let you go, and how people could get their hands on it? Where do they go?
Sure. It's right here. Tangled. It's called Star Spangled Jesus, Leaving Christian Nationalism and Finding a True Faith. So it's kind of my story. I also talk about Christian nationalism, both historically and currently, but it talks about my time. I sang a Christian nationalist song that I wrote on the Jim Baker Show. I was a producer for the 700 Club. Yep. So I was very much in it. And so there's a lot of weird stories that happen when you're inside, but it's kind of a pull back the curtain of what it's like to be a Christian nationalist, what helped make me change my mind, what works on other people, and the mindset that goes on inside the mind to help us give some understanding so that we can change more people's mind. And it's kind of funny. It's kind of based on the content that I make, which is also, I do sketch comedy about hypocrisy and all of that stuff. But you can buy it wherever books are sold. There's also an audiobook that I narrate, and
I've listened to that.
Yeah, hopefully we can all end Christian nationalism.
Let's hope so. Hopefully, no more MAGA Republicans in office either. April, I think you're great. I love the book. Keep up the great work. We'd love to have you on again down the road. And I really do appreciate your time. Keep up the great work, April. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, April.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. That's April A. Joy, everybody, author of Star Spangled Jesus. Get your hands on that book.